All right, so we've created a design system here in a previous section or previous module. And one thing we haven't yet talked about in this entire course is designing subpages or other pages that are a part of an actual layout or a company's website or app. And you're going to find out, though, if you've built a design system, then you've established certain criteria for design in terms of typography and colors. And what you'll discover is it's really quite easy for the most part to build subpages or secondary pages outside of the landing page or the home page or the main page of the website or app. Because then at that point, it's simply a matter of reusing and reverting back to your design system to then create a cohesive secondary page. So we're going to create 2 pages for this fictional project, and we're going to create a join page where there's going to be a form and also kind of like a blog article display page. And you'll see, like I mentioned, it's really not that bad. So let's go ahead and replicate this. So let's rename this, by the way. We'll just call this home, and then this one will be called join. And so we're assuming, of course, maybe if there was a button right here that says join, it would lead to this page. All right, so for this page, we have to make some considerations, some design decisions. To a large degree, they're going to be subjective, but you do have to make decisions, obviously, to get started. So what we'll do is we're going to delete this one right here and all that stuff, and we're going to drag this up. So I'm making the determination that for most of our sub pages, we are going to have this light color background, and the nav will kind of have a white bar at the top, essentially. So let's delete these as well, and we're going to bring this back over. We're going to have a heading here, and this will be simply join now. All right, so if we come over here, we can click that. Can also bring this over as well. And then we can also specify join today for a limited time, just 20% off. Okay, something like that, something simple. So now we're reusing our headline, and we are also using our subheadline. So in the future, if somebody requires you to, like a stakeholder requires you to make a change to the type or the color, it's going to adjust that right here as well. So it's going to be very handy for you. All right, so now what we'll do is create a form element. And again, we can add this to our design system based on the form elements and the text fields and all that good stuff. So what we'll do is let's just copy this, and we'll have an email address field. And we have to make the determination if we want to use the same font size for our labels versus our section for our subheadings. So if we look at this and we go to inspect, it's currently 26. We could just make this 20 or even 22. So what we can do is break this or detach it and change this to 22. And that looks fine to me. So we can go ahead and add this to a text style right here. And we can just call this form label. Let's add it first there. We don't want to search for it. And there we go. So now we'll go ahead and create a rectangle, which will serve as our email address field. And let's go ahead and make this white with 4 for our radius. All right. And that's looking pretty good right there. We could decide to, in the future to add a drop shadow, which may make sense. But for now, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and create a component out of this. But first, we're going to copy it. We'll go to our assets, and we'll create a new section called forms. So let's call forms. We'll call this text fields. And let's copy this let's just place this one right here for now. All right. And what we'll want to do is, again, we want to make sure that this component, let's create a component out of it, is flexible. And it is by default. However, we don't want that happening with our email address field. Notice how it collapses. So we'll double click into here and we'll make sure that it's not set at scale. Instead, we'll just choose left. And now that issue doesn't happen. All right. So we also want to create a component variant out of this for a focus field as well. You always want to do that with your form elements. So right here, we'll double click into this section and we will give it a stroke. So we'll give it a stroke here. This is how we're going to denote that it's currently a field that they can choose. So for a stroke, we can use one of our primary colors, like primary color light, and maybe make it 2 pixels. All right, so this one is going to be called, we'll call this focused. And this by default is of course default. All right, great. Let's delete this one at the bottom. Again, with the cards, if you have a form element that might be on a white background, you would need to create either one with a stroke or a drop shadow so that people can clearly see the form element itself. So if we go back to design, we can come to our assets and click on forms and just drop that right there. And so we'll add a little bit more. We'll hit Shift F, or Control Shift 4 rather, to get our grid. And we're going to create a couple more fields. So this one will be first name. We'll duplicate that and drag it over. This will be last name. All right. And then finally, we'll add a button. And we'll choose next step. All right. So as you can see, pretty easy. Now that when you go to create more forms for different areas of the layout, these are already structured, at least the text fields at least. And then of course, if you add other elements like a checkbox, you would want to do that as well. And also do not forget when we go over here to our layers section, into our assets, that you do switch over to the prototype tab to make sure that these are prototyped up, so that when somebody clicks, for instance, onto this, then it's going to change it to that field right here and vice versa. So that when you play it in prototype, it's going to actually work between these elements. All right, let's go ahead and create another subpage and we'll replicate this. We'll just call this article. Except I'm not spelling it right. There we go. And I hit escape by accident. Sorry about that. Hit enter. There we go. All right, so for our article, what we'll do is we'll keep our same headline here. All right, and let's switch back to design. And so we're gonna say the brown blanket went to the market, whatever that means. I just typed in kind of the first thing that came to my mind. So let's delete the form here because we're not going to need a form. And let's make things a little bit larger. And what we'll do is we're going to have a little avatar. So this is going to be another component that we'll create. And so we'll come over here and we'll choose ellipse. We're going to right click, go to plugins and choose Unsplash, and we'll just get a random picture of a person. All right, we'll choose her. There we go. Let's give this a stroke of white, maybe 3 pixels. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And then we'll also create the name. So we'll just say Jane Doe. All right, so Jane Doe, we are going to choose one of our primary colors over here. So maybe we'll choose this one. I think that looks pretty good right there. Maybe, however, we want to make this bold as well. So we change this to bold. And there's Jane. That looks pretty solid to me. So we'll move this up. Let's go back to assets, and we can add this perhaps to this area. Maybe we could just name this general. So we'll have a new section, maybe underneath buttons, and we'll call this avatar. All right, there's Jane. All right, and then what we'll do is create a component out of that. And again, you can have variants of your avatar, depending on, if there's a light or dark mode, or any other situation where you may seem relevant to do such. Now, one thing we don't want to happen is this. So when you're creating your components, always check for that situation. We can also probably stand to put an auto layout on this, and so we can just center that. So now this is working as we expected just by adding an auto layout. Great, so that's avatar. Let's go back to our design, and we can add in assets, or assets up here rather, and add our avatar. Sorry, I went to the wrong layer section. Let's go back to design and then assets. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, and that's pretty good right there. So now we can have perhaps a divider of some sort. Let's see if one of our existing colors that's a part of our design system will work as kind of like a line separator. So we can come over here. Will that work? That looks pretty good. But if you wanted to create a new color just specifically for the separator, especially in relation to this background, you could do that as well. But for me, I'm pretty happy with this as it is. So we'll leave it like that. And now we're gonna have just a bunch of type here. So what we could do is, we know this is already to the very left and right of our grid. We can just copy that. We'll break this. And now if we go back to our topography, we don't yet have a paragraph size. So we can establish that right here. So for a paragraph size, probably you wouldn't want to go larger than 20 or 18. 16 is pretty typical as well. Now we can see this is 18, and this would work just fine. And what we can do is use our Lorem Ipsum plugin. Make sure to install that if you haven't yet. And we'll just choose auto generate. And actually we can make this quite a bit larger and use that again to generate all of it. All right, and one thing I don't like is there's no spacing between these elements, these paragraphs rather, so we can just bump these up like that. And then we'll drag this down just so we have access to kind of get rid of some of these. All right, and we can adjust the leading as well for this specifically. So like around 160 works well here for size 18. All right, I like that. And maybe we can show what a heading like an H3 element looks like in relation to this. So what I can do is just copy all this. We'll remove it by hitting delete or backspace. There we go. And then we will get a new type element. The round walrus is great. And then we will choose under our text our H3. All right. And there we go. So now what we'll do is we're going to add this to our text styles. And this one, I forget our naming convention. We have headline. Okay, we're going to just call this paragraph. Create that style. Of course, we want to apply it to this one as well. All right, that all looks pretty solid. And then we'll come back here to typography. And we will change this to paragraph. Excellent stuff. All right, so I think that's pretty solid. Now you understand how we take a design, based on a homepage or a landing page, and then create a consistent design aesthetic using a design system to create multiple pages.